The 2024 Formula One season has been nothing short of spectacular, delivering thrilling races one after the other. And the Mexican Grand Prix, it was no exception. Packed with gripping battles, controversial moments, and jaw-dropping performances, especially from Kevin Magnussen, it kept us on the edge of our seats. But the real buzz this weekend was all about Max Verstappen. His aggressive defensive maneuvers sparked intense debates, leaving fans and drivers alike wondering should his tactics still be allowed. And here's where things get even more interesting. Lando Norris, with some clever moves, played Max like a maestro controlling a symphony. He pushed Verstappen into not one, but two critical mistakes, earning penalties that knocked him out of contention for the podium. Intrigued? Stick around because we're about to dive deep into the drivers' reactions and explore how these events could reshape the rest of the season. The 2024 Formula One season keeps teasing us with the possibility of a heated title battle, though it's not quite here yet. But just one race could ignite it. Lando Norris had a massive task in Mexico to gain as many points as possible over Max Verstappen to keep his title dreams alive. Although he managed to cut down Max's lead by 10 points, it wasn't the breakthrough he needed. For Lando to clinch the championship, he now faces a near impossible task, outscoring Verstappen by 12 points per race in the remaining 4 rounds. Adding to the drama, McLaren wasn't willing to let things slide after a controversial moment at the U.S. Grand Prix. They officially protested a 5-second penalty handed to Norris late in the race for going off track and gaining an advantage. Interestingly, this penalty came after Norris encountered some fierce but technically legal defending from Verstappen maneuvers that were both impressive and frustrating. Max's precise understanding of the rules is a testament to his skill, though many argue the rules themselves need to be rewritten. Norris, however, learned fast. In Mexico, he applied those same rules to perfection, forcing Verstappen into situations where penalties were inevitable. Their clashes in Mexico highlighted this growing rivalry, with Lando showing that he knew the rulebook inside out. Just as Max had done to him in Texas, Norris positioned himself at key moments to gain the upper hand, ensuring that Verstappen ended up penalized. On lap 10, for example, Lando made a daring move around the outside at turn 4. Since he reached the apex ahead of Verstappen, any attempt by Max to push him off the track would result in a penalty, and that's exactly what happened. Verstappen's frustration grew as the penalties started piling up. Just a few turns later, at turn 7, he made another bold move, lunging down the inside. But this time, he completely lost control, running wide and forcing Norris off the track. The stewards didn't hesitate. It was another 10-second penalty for Max, making it 2 penalties within the first 10 laps. By then, Lando had successfully baited Verstappen into costly mistakes, ending any real competition between the two before the race had even hit its stride. These incidents reignited a debate that had been brewing throughout the season: should aggressive defending, particularly the tactic of forcing opponents off the track at the apex, still be allowed? The FIA had already started discussing the matter with drivers, seeking feedback on how to improve the rulebook. They promised to introduce updated guidelines by the Qatar Grand Prix, just 2 races away. This would bring clarity around what's now being referred to as dive bomb defense, a move where drivers charge deep into corners, leaving little room for opponents. After the race, Norris openly discussed his strategy, explaining that he made sure to position himself ahead at the apex whenever attempting a move on Verstappen. "I knew he'd try to push me wide, like always, but at least this way, if I was ahead at the apex, the penalty would be on him," Lando revealed. He went on to say, "I'm not trying to see this as a win, but more as a lesson. I hope Max realizes that there are limits to how far you can push it." Norris's comments echoed sentiments felt by other drivers who've had their share of tough battles with Verstappen. Lewis Hamilton has previously voiced similar concerns, pointing out that Max often saves his most aggressive tactics for title contenders. "Every time I go into a race against Max, I know it's going to be a fight. Winning doesn't matter to him, he's just focused on beating me," Norris said. "He'll risk everything to stop me, like he did today. I want intense battles with him, but they need to be fair." Norris isn't the only one growing frustrated with Verstappen's defensive style. George Russell, the director of the Grand Prix Drivers Association, hinted at a collective agreement among the drivers. According to him, 19 out of 20 drivers now stand united on what F1's racing guidelines should look like, and they're happy to see penalties being handed out for unfair tactics. It's no mystery who the one driver is that disagrees. Russell said slyly, alluding to Verstappen without naming him directly. Russell explained that most drivers had pushed the FIA to start enforcing these penalties immediately, rather than waiting until 2025 to make formal rule changes. We were clear if something isn't right, it needs fixing now, not at the end of the season, Russell shared. I'm glad the stewards listened and acted promptly. What we saw in Austin and Mexico won't be tolerated going forward, and I suspect we'll see that approach continue in Brazil. The dive bomb defense, which involves braking extremely late and using every inch of the track to push opponents off, is likely to be the main focus of the rule adjustments. The FIA plans to revise the wording about who has the right-of-way at the apex, a loophole that Verstappen has used to great effect. By arriving first at the apex, Max could aggressively use the entire track without facing penalties. But as the stewards have started cracking down, his tactics are becoming a liability rather than an advantage. Not surprisingly, Red Bull team principal Christian Horner came to Verstappen's defense. In a press conference, Horner presented telemetry data from Norris's car, arguing that Lando entered turn 4 at least 15 km/h faster than his usual lap time. He wouldn't have made the corner even if Max hadn't been there, Horner claimed, suggesting that Lando's move was reckless from the start. However, McLaren boss Zak Brown fired back, saying that Horner's argument could just as easily apply to Verstappen's dive-bombing move in Austin, where Max forced Norris off track and still earned Lando a penalty. With Norris now knowing how to use Verstappen's own tactics against him, and the FIA committing to adjust the rules, Max's most reliable weapon seems to be slipping from his hands. But the challenges for the championship leader don't end there. In the remaining 4 races, Verstappen faces new uncertainties, and the odds are stacking against him. Yet, before we dive into those troubles, if you're enjoying the breakdown so far, don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe for more daily F1 insights. Now, let's talk about Kevin Magnussen, a driver who unexpectedly found himself in the middle of the action in Mexico. On a surprisingly long second stint, Magnussen's Haas car began closing in on Verstappen for a potential 6th-place finish. It was a sight no one expected, a Haas closing the gap to Red Bull. Over nearly 50 laps, Magnussen was almost a tenth of a second faster than Verstappen per lap. It was an incredible achievement for the Haas team, who have shown remarkable form in recent races. However, Red Bull's advisor Helmut Marko hinted that Max's struggles might have more to do with issues under the hood rather than just an off day behind the wheel. Marko suggested that Verstappen's car might have been suffering from unseen problems, which could complicate things even further in the upcoming Brazilian Grand Prix. Max had to switch to an engine from his existing pool to avoid a grid penalty in Mexico, Marko explained. But in Brazil, we might not have that option. If we need to install a new engine, Max could be forced to start from the back of the grid or even the pit lane if the change happens under parc fermé conditions. Max himself didn't seem optimistic after the race. Getting back to 6th was okay, but I just couldn't keep up with the Mercedes ahead, he admitted. The grip wasn't there, and I was sliding all over the place. It was a tough race. Red Bull will need to regroup quickly if they hope to maintain their edge in the final races. While the Constructors' Championship is already out of reach, losing the driver's title after such a strong start to the season would be a crushing blow. If Verstappen finds himself battling midfield teams like Haas in Brazil, it could spell disaster for his championship hopes. With his points lead shrinking and Lando Norris in hot pursuit, even a small misstep could turn the title race on its head. Norris knows that overtaking Verstappen won't be easy, but he's clearly gained confidence in exploiting Max's aggressive style. Meanwhile, the FIA's evolving stance on defensive maneuvers may further limit Verstappen's options on track. Marko's hint that Red Bull might need to install a fresh engine raises even more concern. A new engine would mean an automatic penalty, likely forcing Verstappen to start at the back of the grid. Such a setback at this stage could be devastating, especially with the championship on the line. If things go south in Brazil, it may no longer be a question of whether Lando can win, but how much ground Max will need to make up in the final rounds to stay ahead. Red Bull boss Christian Horner, though confident in his team, is aware of the mounting challenges. The season isn't over yet, but it's going to be a fight to the finish, Horner said. We need to maximize every opportunity and solve the issues we faced in Mexico if we want to stay competitive. On the other side, McLaren smells blood. With Norris quickly closing the gap, a title challenge seems more realistic than ever. It's not just Red Bull feeling the heat, every team on the grid is watching closely. If the FIA introduces new rules regarding aggressive defense before the Qatar Grand Prix, it could change the dynamic of the remaining races. Drivers who've been on the receiving end of Verstappen's tactics are eager to see stricter guidelines, while Max will need to adjust his strategy to stay in the fight. With 4 races to go and tensions running high, one thing is certain: the final stretch of the 2024 F1 season will be a showdown to remember. Whether Verstappen can defend his title or if Norris pulls off an upset, the excitement is far from over. And who knows? We might even see Kevin Magnussen or another unlikely hero shake up the grid once again. What are your thoughts on the Mexican Grand Prix? Were the penalties handed to Verstappen justified? Drop your opinions in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this deep dive, be sure to like the video and subscribe to F1 Reverse for more thrilling updates.